All right, we're live, and I got my good friend here, Mellisa Harries from Mindset Abilities. She's here to talk to us today, about mindset. That's always good. But there was something in particular we really wanted to talk about together, and that was kind of self-limiting beliefs, or the things that we're doing to self-sabotage and kind of hold ourselves back. And it's weird because, first, some people are probably like, what are self-limiting beliefs? We're not really sure what they are. But then how the hell do we identify these things as well? Like if we're going to change the way we think and improve our mindset, how do we identify it? So could we start with maybe what you think are self-limiting beliefs, and then how we identify what they are?
So I'm actually going to bounce that back to you. So what do you see? What do you see in the gym and in the ring when people have the capacity, but something's blocking them from following through?
Yeah, look, it's good. Put me right on the spot. Well, we do get it. We do get it a lot. So sometimes a lot of it has to do around the belief systems of how they believe they're going to get better. And often it's not linked to the actual process. They're not respecting the process. They have to think that they're going to get the magic trainer, the magic pad session, I really need to fix up my technique, so I really need some one-on-one time with you, when they're already not listening to you in a group format. Like, just do the things. So I suppose sometimes people tend to look outside themselves rather than inside themselves for the answer. And then I do find people have belief systems that stop them from learning as well, where they're like, oh, I can't get this move, it's too complicated, I need extra help. When you will walk over and to help that person, they go, hey, I need help. You're like, okay, show me. Oh no, I really need you to help. No, I'm not going to help you until you show me the thing that I just did. And then they do it perfect.
Yeah.
So their belief system was already, they sold themselves out that it was too complicated and they couldn't do it and they had no self-confidence. And then they did it, and they're like, that's okay. Or you just adjusted it just ever so slightly that it really wasn't as bad as they thought it was anyway.
Yeah. And I think what you've touched on are two different types of self-limiting beliefs. So one is perfectionism. I must do it perfectly, otherwise it's shit. And so what you'll see with people who are perfectionists is getting it wrong is a massive problem. And I'm not even going to try because I think I'm going to get it wrong. And so their tolerance of doing things poorly is very low. And a perfectionist is likely to work really hard to integrate new information. There's lots of positive traits to perfectionism, but it tends to be very rigid. And so people won't put themselves out there, and you have to take risks in order to excel. You've got to fail in order to win. So it's a real challenge in kind of increasing people's tolerance of getting it wrong as an important part of mastery.
Yeah, important for kids too. Like, you got to let them fail. All the parents that are sitting on the side of the mat wanting to coach their kids, but especially like the 5 to 10-year-olds, go away, stop it. You need to let them fail. The coaches know at what time they're meant to be able to learn some things. Like that 4-year-old that can't do a forward roll, please let them fall over and do a poor forward roll for a while, because by the time they're 5 or 6, they'll get that forward roll. But don't be pushing it. It's really interesting to watch people just not let people fail or do things. It's interesting.
And it's an intergenerational issue that we're facing. So our generation is responsible for it because we had such, from our perspective, hard lives growing up, that we wanted to create a smoother pathway for our kids. And so there's been big changes in how kids experience challenges growing up. Instead of losing at, the swimming carnival, everyone gets a participation award. So kids have actually lost some of those healthy experiences in failing. And then you combine that with social media, where perfection is portrayed everywhere, because people only put their top 5% of their life online. Ads for Coke sell happiness. Everything is marketed as be happy all the time. Life is perfect. You can drink Coke and still be a size 8, so it's a real challenge that people are facing around expectations that they've got to get it right. Otherwise, they're very bad at it. So it's very black and white thinking. If I'm not doing it perfectly, then there's no point in doing it at all.
So we probably could identify maybe a couple of core groups of self-limiting beliefs, as in groups. Like, is it a confidence and a fear of failure? What would be some of the other common self-limiting beliefs that we'd see? Because I know there's definitely a factual one as well. Like, let's throw a nutrition one out there real quick. Like, often people are chasing a fad or something that's been marketed to them as a solution, but it's not actually connected to the science or the process. It's same with your fight coach. He's going to have a process for you to get better and go through things. Same as your business coach. They're going to have a process to go through things. So, like, could that be a procedural self-limiting belief or factual? What would we call that, and how would we, obviously a coach would help identify that for you.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a risk of just having bad information, self-limiting belief, because the information is incorrect. But I think one of the things you were touching on before was like poor self-confidence, poor self-esteem. So someone actually has the capacity, but their belief is that they can't do it for some reason. And even though they've got data that shows them that they're capable, they still have that perspective that I'm not good enough.
Do you think something like a gratefulness journal would be helpful for people like that to go, okay, well, I just finished a training session and I did learn something, so I should write that down. Like I won something, to maybe try and lock in that kind of like positivity and belief, because sometimes I might get someone that lacks confidence and they need someone to give them a boot every now and then and say, hey, you can do this just fine. You're just as smart as everyone else. Stop playing the fool. Because I think that there seems to be, like, for some people, an ability to play the fool because that's the role that they've fallen into.
Yeah, because if I make a joke about it, then I don't have to feel bad about the real feelings that might sit under it. So it's a bit of a coping strategy for some. But we use that kind of strategy all the time in psychology about gathering the data, writing down 3 things that went well and why. And it might even be a useful coaching strategy at the end of a session, to go around and say, what did you do well today and why? So that people are gathering those pieces of data that say, I'm not doing poorly, actually I'm doing well.
Yeah, look, that's a really, really good idea. Really good idea. And a great strategy for teams that are sparring hard with each other to get down at the end of the day and go, hey, man, you're doing this really good. Far out. You're doing that really, really well. And also then you can talk about the other side of how to deal with that problem as well. Same as nutrition, it's really helpful to sit down at the end of the week with your coach and be honest and say, I did this well. I didn't do this well. I cheated at this time of day.
I think part of that is also culture around mindset. And I know we've touched on it previously around growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So it's Carol Dweck who's done the research in this area. She's got the book called Mindset. And she says that people have a growth mindset, believe that if you put effort into something, then you get better at it. And so it's all right to make mistakes and to fail things because you're learning from those experiences and that's how you grow. Whereas people who have a fixed mindset go, this is the limit. This is as good as I'm going to get. So what's the point in trying harder? Because if I'm not very good, it won't improve my abilities. And so with students, you see it with kids who are told, oh, you did really well on that, you must be so smart. They actually give up on tasks over saying to a child, you did really well on that, you must have worked really hard. So it's one of those things that parenting makes a big difference, but as a coach and as a culture, that you can really integrate that in showing people that the effort that they're putting in is what's important. And we're not aiming for perfection, we're aiming for progress.
Yep.
And really modeling, what you've learned from your failure experiences, how you've grown as an athlete, as a coach, as a businessman, from going through really difficult things, that we can really create that culture where getting it wrong is so much better than not doing it at all.
Yeah, and you know what? I still get big things wrong every now and then. We still make mistakes. Like we're still trying to improve at the structure for coaching. I still make mistakes with the business and with people as well. So that's a big one. Like people are such a difficult thing sometimes, and you still make mistakes with people. And I think over time, to be successful, you just get a whole lot better at accepting that conflict.
Yeah. And I
where-
think to give like a strategy around that, what's really helpful to tolerate mistakes and failures is actually to learn self-compassion, because when we get things wrong, what we say to ourselves has a big impact on how much we wallow in it. And if we can be as kind to ourselves as we are to other people, actually we get over it quicker. Because mistakes and errors are inevitable. I was delivering a workshop to a government organisation during the week, and I thought a woman had her son in the room, and I'm like, is that your son in the background? It was her colleague, and it was a woman. I'm like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I was mortified. And I just had to kind of go, you know what? I can't see it very well. It's really small. Mistakes happen. I'm sure that she won't dwell on it as much as I will. And so it's like the self-talk, not to put a silver lining around it, but to be as reassuring to ourselves as we are to other people. Because we're so nice to our mates, don't we deserve to be that nice to ourselves?
Yeah, look, that's something I talk about all the time. And some people, I think, look at me like I'm crazy, but you really have to be your own best friend, your own best supporter, like the parent that you wish you had inside your own head, all those things. So I've definitely changed, even as an athlete during the time, like I used to be like, like swear at myself and use like maybe negative things, like you stop being weak and all that stuff. And I replaced that with like, this is a time when the going gets tough, the tough get going, like I changed it to positive talk. That makes training and competing and all those things actually much more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like those hateful things that you say to yourself will fuel you for a while, but unless you have a really dark soul or like you want to be tormented for the rest of your life, you need to get rid of that shit.
Yeah.
You really do. Because, like if you're talking to yourself like that for an hour every day, like if you're training 3 hours a day, talking to yourself like you're weak and using that negative self-talk, then no wonder when you stop competing and stop winning, you get depressed.
Yeah.
You gotta talk to yourself much nicer than that. There's ways to motivate yourself without putting yourself down.
So you would never tolerate someone talking to your girls like that, or to Linda like that. Like you'd step in and you would have like strong words with that person, but for some reason we accept it internally. And I think it's important to kind of recognize, or at least try and document, what kind of coach are you internally? Are you that critical coach that's like spitting in your face, or are you that reassuring, supportive, encouraging kind of voice? And I think if you want to make changes there, it starts with something really simple. Like, what would I tell a friend who was going through the same thing?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's
I probably sit somewhere in the middle.
well, I was reading about a research study last night that showed that higher levels of self-compassion are related to quicker levels of recovery from PTSD for combat veterans. So
Yep.
it's an American study, looked at combat vets from Iraq and Afghanistan who had experienced PTSD because of their combat exposure, and how quickly they recovered from it. The higher the levels of self-compassion, the quicker the recovery. So it's a pretty powerful strategy, even for quite hardened, very masculine people. And I think it gets caught up as like this soft and fluffy kind of strategy, but actually, it's so helpful. And when we're looking at performance, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to get things wrong, and you're going to lose. So if you can recover quicker from those experiences because you speak to yourself the way that you would speak to a loved one, it's a great skill to master.
Yeah, that's really intelligent, actually, and it reminds me of guys like Jocko. He seems like very like crazy alpha Navy SEAL, but at the same time, if you listen to his podcast, you'd realize actually how compassionate he is and how much he cares for not only his soldiers but for the people in the countries that he went to as well. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because if I had to think about some of the people that struggled the most as veterans, some of those people weren't exactly the most compassionate going through the refugee camps, etc., and whatnot as well. So I think often our upbringing or the way that we talk to ourselves is super important. Now, for people that are trying to break that cycle of talking to themselves poorly, would you recommend journaling, affirmations? What are the types of things that they can do to improve that self-talk, to try and destroy some of those self-limiting beliefs?
So I'm first going to say affirmations don't have good research to support it. So what they found was when you used positive affirmations, if you had high self-confidence, you became more arrogant, because you look in the mirror and you go, I'm going to have an amazing day. And your brain goes, yeah, you are, because you're fabulous. But if you've got low self-confidence and you're using positive affirmations, actually it makes you feel worse, because you look in the mirror and go, I'm going to have a great day today. And your brain goes, no, you're not. You're shit. And here's 10 reasons why you're shit. So positive affirmations that aren't grounded in believable, realistic statements do not help.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that completely. Like, it has to be like a holistic plan. And if you threw affirmations inside of that holistic plan, where, it could just be something like, when you're training, the thing you're going to say to yourself is, now's the time to get tough. You can do it. Like, just know what those cues are. Because when that negative thing comes into your head, that's the only time the affirmation is useful. You got to replace it with something else, in my opinion. But you're right. It would be weak if it wasn't attached to like a routine of like taking action of how to actually get better to destroy those beliefs. Because you can't destroy a belief by thinking it away. You got to action it away.
And I think recording the data around what you're doing well is important, like that journaling and gratitude exercises, so that you're building up a bank of evidence that says that you're not shit, or at least in specific contexts, you're okay. So we're not aiming for positive thinking necessarily. I really love the idea of a performance statement over a self-affirmation. So a performance statement is a very short kind of statement of things that you can do, not things that you can't. And there's two ways that you can come at it. One is imagine that you're in the most important performance scenario of your life. It's a really important competition and your coach is standing behind you just before you're about to perform. What is the one or two things your coach would say, focus on this? So if it was like baseball, it might be soft knees and follow through. So two simple, practical things that you can focus on. And then the other perspective to come at it is same competition, really important. Now, you as the expert in you are saying to you as the athlete, what are these one or two things that you should focus on? And they might be the same thing, but they might be different things. But we're all the experts in our own bodies and our own minds. And it might be something a little bit different. Like it might be something like breathe clear, keep working. So it's a real reset onto these are things that I can do rather than focusing on things that I think I can't. And that's the self-limiting belief. When people go, I can't do that. Well, actually, it's a prediction of the future. You haven't done it yet. Like, give it a go and gather the data before you say you can't.
Yeah.
So, performance statement.
I do like that. It's really, really good advice, not only for beginners but for top end athletes as well. Like you could tend to have a tough fight, have a loss, and beat yourself up for ages, but you should be writing down that performance statement and performance review of yourself and make sure you're getting it right. Blaming the judges, blaming your coach, like blaming like something that happened at the time for it doesn't really help. If you can step outside and be objective, you might even find a whole heap of stuff in that fight that you did well. Like you need to know what to sustain and what to improve on it as well. And and that's a great actually benefit. I mean, we were both in the military, and you never did anything without looking it over at the end. What did we do well?
Yeah. And
well.
I miss kind of the constant feedback, about things that you do well, things you can improve, and I think it's something that we've taken for granted about our military experience, that's how you excel, is by getting constant feedback in this learning culture around give it a go, review the results.
Yeah, it's super helpful. Again, there's so many good things about the military. It just depends how you frame it for yourself.
That's it.
As well. Now,
can I just add? So I've spoken about some surface level kind of thinking processes, and I just want to acknowledge that the source of where these thinking processes are coming is really deep. And I practice something called Schema Therapy, which looks at how our early childhood experiences lay down our foundations for how we view the world. And we call them schema. They're like blueprints for our expectations of ourselves and each other. And for some people, it will be helpful to unpack that, to speak to a psychologist about not just how they're reacting to the performance condition, but what the history of that reaction is back through their childhood. Because often you find like stressful experiences, like dad was a veteran, he was on a hair trigger. If I didn't do things perfectly, then I got in trouble. So there's a connection between perfectionism and anxiety because of those earlier experiences. So while these thinking strategies are helpful, I do want to acknowledge like the deeper foundation, and sometimes it's helpful for people to go into counselling, even if they don't have mental health issues, but they want to improve that performance because they need to address some of the sediment when the thoughts are like the surface of the pond.
Man, I love that. And that's really, 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 really good advice, because there's a bunch of coaches out there that have probably identified people like that, like, oh man, this is deep. And I'm trying to break these really deep belief systems by pumping people up or being that person that doesn't accept average from that person, like nobody else ever has you know, expected that person to do better, you know. And I really think it would be beneficial, because your coach, that's me, is not a psychologist, and you know, so I'm going to be like the machete, you know, whereas your psych is going to be more like a gentle surgeon who will be able to walk you through that. So when you get to the machete, there's less to chop off.
That's it. Because the other challenge is that, like when we've got this authority, like you're the coach and you've got your athlete, like sometimes that picks up on parental stuff as well. And I know it's really Freudian, but it's often at this unconscious level. Like you speak in a tone that's similar to how, you know, dad used to speak, or for me, I find the gym really triggering in different ways because of difficult army experiences, like being unfit, getting yelled at, and feeling hopelessness. And so if I'm compared to others at the gym, like I have a really strong response to that. You know, so for coaches out there, if you've got someone who has this massive reaction that seems kind of out of nowhere, it's probably because there's this deeper stuff that's going on that, while not a problem, would be helpful to shake out and kind of help to file it away a bit differently.
Yeah, and look, that's a great one for fitness trainers out there, especially if you're a young 20-something fitness trainer. Respect people's effort, even if they've done fuck all to get tired. You got to give them a pat on the back. There is no place for negative encouragement at all, ever. And if that person is struggling to breathe, even overly positive encouragement at that point in time is not okay. You know, like they don't need to be throwing up. What they need to do is learn somehow to have a joyful experience whilst increasing their fitness. You know, like intensity does not trump enjoyment or consistency. You know, so it's really, really important for young fitness trainers to kind of understand that. You know, like if someone looks like they need a rest, sometimes it's okay to give them a rest, you know, and tell them that it's okay to rest, you know, and as they get better, they'll rest less and push themselves more. But again, it's just like a layering of skills, a technique, layering of mindset. That stuff happens over time. It doesn't happen by flipping a switch, you know. Like I've had half decent athletes before with mindset problems, but they refused to make little changes in the gym to the way they trained. So they kept competing the same and making the same excuses. And, you know, like, and then they're like, they blame you and move to another place and they're doing the same shit.
Yeah.
And the same excuses. You know?
Oh, yeah. I've got clients who are similar.
And you can only do a couple of things. You just have to make small changes at a time to the way that you do things. And then you'll improve.
That's it. And people have to be ready as well. So you might give feedback to someone about, like, I notice, you know, when you say that you can't, but then I watch you later on and I see you doing that thing that you said you couldn't do, you know, and I'm wondering if it's how you're thinking about things that's impacting on how you're performing. Like, you give them that feedback and they might say, fuck you. Who the fuck are you to be, you know, talking to me like that? And they avoid and they get out of there. You know, that's the kind of person who thinks about it and usually accesses some kind of resources around it. You know, so don't be discouraged when someone pushes back or you don't see them again, because it is a slow burn. Like, people have to kind of take their time to absorb that information. And if it's done in a supportive way, they'll come back to you and they'll go, you know, I really had a good think about that and, you know, I want to work on it.
Yeah, that's really great advice for coaches out there. And an older coach once told me sometimes you got to put the horses out to the paddock for a while, let them go, let them run free, and then when they're ready to come back into your paddock to do the work, then they can come back in and do the work. But it's okay to tell them that, well, until you're ready to do the work, you're going to go out to the paddock for a while and look after yourself, and that might mean they go somewhere else. But that's okay too, you know. Like, you got to look after your your own workspace and your own paddock and your own culture as well.
That's it. So I guess for people who are finding that they're not progressing the way they want, or kind of finding things, that they're triggered by different experiences at the gym, or they feel like they're failing in some way, I guess taking on board advice from people when they trust their coach, they're much more likely to receive it. But kind of it's okay to feel confronted and annoyed and distressed when you get that feedback. And I think if you just kind of pay attention to certain keywords in your mind, I think help to create a bit of visibility of what's happening. And I think when you say in your mind, I can't, or I don't, that they're kind of good indicators that it's a mental barrier rather than a physical barrier of what's happening. I think if you're avoiding something because you don't want to fail, and you feel embarrassed giving it a go in front of other people, like that's something that suggests there's a little bit more going on that's worth a bit of reflection.
Yeah, it's really difficult to step outside of yourself when you're getting that feedback too. And I used to catch myself doing it a bit because I was so used to being self-coached, and I'm traveling away for information and to be coached, and then someone will come over and coach me and go, oh, hey Ian, just around the corner from that there's this other arm lock, and I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm doing this. That person doesn't give a shit what you're doing. What they're trying to do is give you options and show you that there is other ways to do things to add to you. They just gave you value and you cut it off because you weren't able to step outside yourself and just listen. Forget about what you were doing and take that outside input to be able to put it into what you're doing. And I think that's probably really common for people with self-limiting beliefs around fitness and nutrition, going, oh, he doesn't know, I've got to eat at that time, I'm tired at that time, I have to eat that. No, doesn't he know I work night shifts, I need lollies to get through night shift. I can't possibly do it without it, I need the calories to stay awake.
So remember that defensive pessimism that we spoke about a few weeks ago? Like that's a helpful record to track, like the barriers and the failures when people are trying to change. Because I think that if we record the failures, we're going to get much, much further than when we record the successes. And that's probably, a good practice to recommend to someone if you're noticing those self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah, because the frustration is the way. Where you're messing up, where the resistance is, that's where the progress is to be made. 100%. It makes so much sense to me. So if anybody wants that, actually, they can send me a message and we'll pass it on. It's definitely I've passed it on at least 2 or 3 times since we spoke last. And I'm hoping it was really helpful for those people as well.
Can I make one final recommendation? And that's about remembering your values, about what's important about who you are in that performance space. Because if you can reconnect with the reasons why you want to be doing what you're doing, I think it's easy to accept the barriers and the failures and the losses. And so even if it's just kind of like just a workout that you're doing, not because you're training for anything in particular, thinking about what do you want to be proud of looking back on that session? Like, what is it about how you want to be that is something that you want to feel good about afterwards? And I'm hoping that you keep putting one foot in front of the other, that you listen and you try to incorporate the feedback that you get. It doesn't have to be outcomes based, like that you lift a certain amount or that you run a certain speed, but it might just be winding it back to, well, it's important to me to have a positive attitude and keep going even though I'm uncomfortable. And I think that switching your focus to what's important to you about who you are in those sessions can be a good way to get around some of those self-limiting beliefs.
And that's really, really, really good advice. I think self-awareness, it would probably be the number one skill for anyone wanting to get better. You know, what are your values? What are you here for? What do you want to
Mm,
be remembered for? You know, like, how do you want to make people feel? Sitting
mm,
down and writing those things about what do you want people to say about you. You know, like, as much as we
yeah,
shouldn't care what people think is a flag to who you are. You know,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
obviously you got to put those people in boxes. Like, what does my family think of me? What does my
yeah,
teammates think of me? What does
mm,
my coach think of me? Like, you have to put them into boxes of importance. It doesn't matter what Joe Blog says that you've never had dinner with in your life, that doesn't know you. Those people don't care. But it really
mm,
does matter what your immediate family who live under your roof think of
mm.
you. If they think you're an asshole, there's a good chance that you might be.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's possible. All right. That
Um,
was, look, Mel, we've unpacked so much great stuff
Always.
this morning, and I do think it's going to be super helpful um, out there, and it looks like some people have enjoyed it. Thanks, Kelvin. Thanks, Stephen. Um, I really do look forward to these chats every time, and it'd be great if we could keep doing them. So
I
thanks,
like-
Mel. If there's anything you ever want to talk about, just send me a message, and we'll have another chat.
Awesome. So, final point to finish on, we're aiming for progress, not perfection.
Progress, not perfection. Again, you know, like, action. No problems ever fix themselves, but don't expect it to fix itself at the first try. But great advice, and I do love that. It's something I live my life by. I do. I'd rather just have a chop, even if it's no good.
That's it.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Mel.
Thank you.